The garage door opener hadn't worked in 3 months, but I'd been too busy debugging code to fix it. That Friday evening, as I manually hauled the heavy metal door down, I heard Jade's voice carrying through our kitchen window. She was talking to someone on the phone, her tone lighter than I'd heard in years. Tomorrow night, definitely. Cole will be working late as usual. He won't even notice I'm gone. I froze, my hand still gripping the door handle. 22 years of marriage, and my wife was planning something she clearly didn't want me to know about. The smart thing would have been to confront her immediately. Instead, I found myself listening. No, I'm done pretending this marriage works. He's so buried in his software company that I could disappear for a week, and he'd only notice when he ran out of clean shirts. My software company, the one that had finally started turning real profit after 8 years of 18-hour days and maxed-out credit cards. The one that kept our mortgage current and our twin daughters in private school. I waited until I heard her footsteps move toward the living room before entering through the side door. Jade was curled up on our couch, scrolling through her phone with a smile I hadn't seen directed at me in months. "Hey," I said, settling into my usual chair across from her. "Good day?" "Fine." She didn't look up from her screen. "You're home early. It's 8:30. Like I said, early." Her fingers moved rapidly across the phone's surface. "I'm going out tomorrow night, by the way. Don't wait up." There it was. The moment I'd been dreading and, if I'm being honest, expecting for months. My wife of 22 years was about to lie to my face. "Oh? Where are you going?" "Just out with some friends from the real estate office. Girls' night." Still not looking at me. "We're trying that new wine bar downtown." I nodded slowly, watching her face. Jade had always been a terrible liar. Her left eye twitched when she was being dishonest, a tell I'd noticed during our second date when she claimed she loved horror movies. She'd spent our entire screening of The Shining with her face buried in my shoulder. Her left eye was twitching now. "Sounds fun," I said. "Anyone I know?" "Just work people. You wouldn't know them." She finally looked up, and I saw something I hadn't expected. Guilt mixed with defiance. "I'll probably be late. Don't wait up." The repetition confirmed what I already knew. My wife was planning to spend tomorrow night with someone who wasn't me, and she was lying about it. The smart move would have been to call her out right then, demand the truth, maybe suggest marriage counseling. Instead, I heard myself saying something that surprised us both. "Actually, I was hoping you'd say that." Her face changed instantly. The guilty defiance melted into confusion, then something that looked almost like disappointment. "What?" "I said I was hoping you'd finally be honest about what's really going on." Jade set her phone down slowly, her eyes never leaving mine. "I don't know what you mean." "Sure you do." I leaned back in my chair, feeling strangely calm. "You're not going out with friends tomorrow night. You're going on a date." The silence stretched between us like a taut wire. I could hear our neighbor's dog barking 3 houses down, the hum of our refrigerator, the tick of the grandfather clock Jade's mother had given us for our 10th anniversary. "Cole, It's okay," I said, and meant it. "I've known something was wrong for months. You've been distant, secretive, working late more often. Your phone is constantly buzzing with messages you don't want me to see. You haven't touched me in 6 weeks. Her face flushed red. "That's not... We've both been busy. Jade." My voice was quieter now, but firm. "Just tell me the truth. For once in the past year, just tell me the truth." She stared at me for a long moment, and I saw the exact second she made her decision. Her shoulders straightened, her chin lifted, and the guilt in her eyes hardened into something colder. "Fine. Yes, I'm going on a date tomorrow night, with someone who actually appreciates me, who makes me feel like a woman instead of a roommate, someone who doesn't spend every waking moment staring at computer screens and ignoring his family." The words hit exactly as she'd intended them to, but instead of anger, I felt something unexpected. Relief. After months of walking on eggshells, of wondering what I'd done wrong, of trying to fix problems I couldn't even identify, the truth was finally out in the open. "How long?" I asked. "Does it matter?" "It matters to me." She picked up her phone again, clutching it like a shield. 3 months, maybe 4. "What's his name?" "Trent." She said it softly, almost tenderly, and I realized this wasn't just physical attraction or a midlife crisis. My wife was in love with someone else. "Trent Corren? The building inspector?" Her eyes widened. "How did you—" "I've seen his name on some of your client files. Plus, you mentioned him a few times over the past couple months, always very casually." I rubbed my temples, feeling the first stirrings of a headache. I should have put it together sooner. Jade stood up abruptly, pacing to the window that overlooked our backyard. "This isn't how I wanted you to find out." "How did you want me to find out?" "I don't know. Maybe I thought you'd care enough to notice on your own." That stung, but I kept my voice level. "I noticed. I just hoped I was wrong." She turned back to face me, and for a moment I saw a glimpse of the woman I'd married, vulnerable, conflicted, maybe even sorry. Then her expression hardened again. "I'm not going to apologize for finding someone who makes me happy." "I'm not asking you to apologize. I'm asking you to be honest about what happens next." "What do you mean?" I stood up, suddenly exhausted. "I mean, are you planning to leave me for him? Are we getting divorced? Are you going to keep sneaking around indefinitely? What's the plan here, Jade?" She was quiet for so long I thought she wasn't going to answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I don't know." "Well, you better figure it out, because I'm not going to be the husband who pretends not to know his wife is having an affair." I walked toward the stairs, then paused with my foot on the bottom step. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry I made you feel unappreciated. I never meant for that to happen. Cole, enjoy your date tomorrow night. We'll talk when you get home." I climbed the stairs to our bedroom, closed the door, and sat on the edge of the bed we'd shared for over 2 decades. Through the thin walls, I could hear Jade moving around downstairs, the soft beep of her phone, the creak of floorboards, the whisper of her voice as she made another call. My laptop was on the nightstand where I'd left it that morning. I opened it and stared at the screen, but instead of diving into code like I usually did when I was stressed, I found myself opening a web browser. I had some research to do. Saturday morning arrived gray and drizzling, matching my mood perfectly. I woke up alone. Jade's side of the bed hadn't been slept in. I found her in the guest room, still in yesterday's clothes, her phone charging on the nightstand. She was awake, staring at the ceiling. "Morning," I said from the doorway. "Morning." She didn't look at me. "Coffee's ready downstairs." "Thanks." The awkwardness was suffocating. 22 years of marriage, and we were talking like strangers in an elevator. I went back to the kitchen and poured myself a second cup of coffee, then settled at the breakfast table with my laptop. The research I'd done the night before had been illuminating, though not in the way I'd expected. Trent Corren wasn't just any building inspector. He was the building inspector who'd been flagging issues on several of Jade's recent property sales, issues that had mysteriously resolved themselves after she'd started working closely with him to address them. Issues that had cost her clients thousands in unnecessary repairs. I'd also discovered that Jade had been much busier than she'd let on. Her real estate license showed activity on deals I'd never heard her mention, properties in parts of town she'd never expressed interest in before. All of them had required building inspections. All of them had been handled by Trent. My phone buzzed with a text from my business partner, Rick. "Emergency client call this morning. Can you handle the Morrison account review?" I typed back, "Can't today, family stuff. Push it to Monday." "Everything okay?" I stared at the question for a long moment before typing, "Not really. We'll fill you in later." Jade appeared in the kitchen doorway, still in yesterday's clothes, but with her hair brushed and her face washed. She looked younger somehow, more like the woman I'd married. "Cole, about last night." "It's okay," I said. "We don't need to rehash it. But I want to explain. Jade, you're going on a date tonight with another man. What is there to explain?" She poured herself coffee and sat across from me at the table. "It's not that simple." "It seems pretty simple to me." "You don't understand what it's been like." Her voice was gaining strength, the defensive edge returning. "Living with someone who's never here, who cares more about code than conversation, who hasn't taken me on a real date in 3 years. I took you to dinner for your birthday in March. That wasn't a date, Cole. That was an obligation. You spent half the meal checking your phone for server alerts." She was right, and we both knew it. My company had been consuming my life, especially over the past 2 years as we'd finally started gaining real traction. But that didn't make her betrayal easier to swallow. "So instead of talking to me about it, you decided to start seeing someone else." "I tried talking to you. Remember marriage counseling? Dr. Valden? You went to 3 sessions and then claimed you were too busy." I did remember. Dr. Soren Valden, a soft-spoken therapist who'd asked a lot of probing questions about our communication patterns and intimacy levels. I'd found the sessions uncomfortable and, frankly, a waste of time that could have been spent fixing the problems with our customer database. "I remember," I said quietly. "Trent listens to me. He asks about my day, my thoughts, my dreams. When's the last time you asked me about my dreams, Cole?" The question hung in the air between us, heavier than anything that had been said so far. I couldn't remember the last time I'd asked Jade about anything that wasn't directly related to household logistics or our daughter's schedules. Somewhere along the way, conversations about feelings, fears, or even simple curiosity about each other had been replaced by calendars, carpools, and quiet avoidance. "You're right," I said. "I've been a terrible husband." She blinked, clearly not expecting that response. For a split second, I saw confusion cross her face, followed by something like relief. Maybe she'd been bracing for denial, for anger, for a fight. "But that doesn't make what you're doing okay." "I know." Her voice was small now, stripped of defensiveness. "I know it doesn't. So what do you want to do about it?" She stared into her coffee cup, watching the surface ripple slightly as her hands trembled. "I don't know. I really don't know." The uncertainty sounded real, not performative, and somehow that made it worse. "Are you in love with him?" The question slipped out before I could stop it. I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer, and part of me hoped she would dodge it, soften it, give me something vague enough to hold on to. Jade was quiet for a long time. The kitchen felt unbearably still, every second stretching thin. When she finally looked up, her eyes were wet. "I think so." The words hit me like a physical blow. Hearing her admit the affair was one thing. Hearing her admit she loved him was something else entirely. It rewrote the story in my head in a way I couldn't undo. Then I guess that answers the question about what happens next. "Cole?" "It's okay, Jade. Really. I'd rather know where we stand." Even as I said it, my chest felt tight, like the air had been knocked out of me. I closed my laptop and stood up, suddenly needing to be anywhere but in that kitchen, anywhere that didn't smell like coffee and old routines. "Where are you going?" "For a drive. I need to think." "What about tonight?" I paused at the door, my hand resting on the frame longer than necessary. "What about it? Are you going to be here when I get back?" "I'll be here. We need to talk about the girls, about the house, about how we're going to handle this. The practical things, the unavoidable things." She nodded, looking relieved. "Okay, good." I grabbed my keys and headed for the garage. As I backed out of the driveway, I saw Jade watching me from the kitchen window, her phone already pressed to her ear. I didn't need to guess who she was calling. I drove aimlessly for an hour, letting streets blur together, trying to process what my life had become. My marriage was over, that much was clear. The question now was what came next, and whether I had any control left over, how it unfolded. Without really deciding to, I found myself pulling into the parking lot of my office building, a converted warehouse in the industrial district that Rick and I had bought 3 years ago. The place was quiet, almost hollow, the kind of silence that felt earned. The building was empty on weekends, which was exactly what I needed. I let myself into our suite and settled at my desk, but instead of opening my laptop, I pulled out a file folder I'd been avoiding for months. Inside were documents from our marriage counseling sessions, notes filled with optimism that now felt painfully naive, including a postnuptial agreement Dr. Valden had suggested we consider. I'd forgotten about it until last night, but there it was, signed by both Jade and me 18 months ago, during a brief period when we'd thought we were making progress. The agreement was straightforward. In the event of divorce due to infidelity, the unfaithful spouse would forfeit any claim to the other's business assets. At the time, we'd both signed it as a gesture of good faith, a symbol of our commitment to rebuilding trust. I remembered Jade saying it felt unnecessary, that we'd never need it. I'd agreed, believing her. I'd never imagined we'd actually need it. But now, with my software company valued at $4.2 million according to our most recent investor meetings, that piece of paper had become very important indeed. It wasn't about revenge. It was about survival. I made a photocopy of the agreement and locked the original back in my desk drawer. The click of the lock sounded louder than it should have in the empty office. Then I picked up my phone and called the one person I knew I could trust with this situation. Rick, it's Cole. I need to ask you a favor, and it's going to sound strange. Rick Martinez had been my business partner for 6 years and my friend for 8. He was also the only person I knew who could handle delicate situations with both discretion and efficiency. When I explained what I needed, he listened without judgment and asked only the questions that mattered. "You're sure about this?" he asked, as we sat in his home office Sunday afternoon. "Once we start down this path, there's no taking it back." "I'm sure." I handed him the postnuptial agreement. She made her choice. Now I'm making mine. Rick reviewed the document carefully, his lawyer's training evident in how he examined every clause and provision. "This is solid. Dr. Valden knew what he was doing when he drafted this. Can you handle the technical side? The account mirroring? Yeah, that's straightforward. You're the administrator on your family phone plan, so it's completely legal. We'll just be backing up data to a secure server." He looked up from the papers. "How long has this been going on?" "She says 3 or 4 months, but I suspect longer. There were signs I ignored." "What kind of signs?" I told him about the late nights, the secretive phone calls, the way Jade had started dressing differently for work, how she'd suddenly become interested in fitness and had joined an expensive gym, how she'd been working with Trent Corren on multiple property deals, always finding reasons why they needed to meet in person. "You think there's more to it than just the affair?" "I think there's a lot more to it. She's been moving money around, Rick, small amounts, but consistently. Cash withdrawals from our joint account, always just under the reporting threshold." Rick made notes as I talked. "What else?" "She's been pushing me to expand the business faster than we can sustain. Kept asking about our valuation, about when we might consider selling. Last month, she suggested I bring in outside investors." "That doesn't necessarily mean anything." "Maybe not, but combined with everything else?" I shrugged. "I think she's been planning her exit strategy for a while." Rick was quiet for several minutes, reviewing his notes. Finally, he looked up. "Cole, I have to ask, are you doing this for revenge, or are you doing this to protect yourself?" The question caught me off guard. I'd been so focused on the logistics of what needed to be done that I hadn't really examined my motivations. "Both, probably," I admitted. "But mostly protection. If she's planning to leave me for Trent, I need to know what I'm dealing with. And if she thinks she's going to take half my company with her, she's got another think coming. Fair enough. But we do this carefully, methodically, and completely above board. I won't help you with anything that crosses legal or ethical lines. Understood. Rick pulled out his laptop and began typing. Okay, here's what we're going to do. First, I'm going to set up the data mirroring on your family account. Everything will be backed up to an encrypted server, time-stamped and legally admissible. Second, I'm going to run a comprehensive financial analysis of your joint accounts going back 2 years. Third, I'm going to have our corporate attorney review the postnuptial agreement and prepare the necessary paperwork. What kind of paperwork? Divorce papers, asset protection filings, a formal notice of the agreement's activation. He paused. And a public statement for your professional networks. Public statement? Cole, you run a software company. Your professional reputation is tied to your personal credibility. If this gets messy, and it probably will, you want to control the narrative from the beginning. I hadn't thought about that, but he was right. In the tech world, perception mattered almost as much as performance. If word got out that my wife had left me, there would be whispers about instability, questions about my judgment, concerns about my ability to focus on the business. What kind of statement? Something brief and professional, just acknowledging that you and Jade are divorcing due to irreconcilable differences, that it's amicable, and that it won't affect your business operations. He looked up from his laptop. We'll post it on your LinkedIn before she has a chance to create her own version of events. The idea of making our private business public made me uncomfortable, but I could see the strategic value. When? Tomorrow morning, early, before most people check their feeds. I nodded. What else? We wait. Let her make her moves, document everything, and stay 3 steps ahead. Rick closed his laptop. How are you holding up? Honestly, I'm not sure. Part of me is relieved that it's finally out in the open. Part of me is furious, and part of me is just sad. That's normal. 22 years is a long time. Yeah. I stood up, suddenly exhausted. I should get home. The girls are coming back from their weekend at Jade's parents' house tonight. How are you going to handle that? Carefully. They don't need to know the details, at least not yet. Rick walked me to the door. Cole? For what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing. Jade made her choice. Now you get to make yours. I drove home through the quiet Sunday evening streets, thinking about choices and consequences. When I pulled into my driveway, I saw 2 cars parked in front of my house, Jade's SUV and a silver sedan I didn't recognize. Through the living room window, I could see Jade sitting on the couch across from an older man in a suit. They were deep in conversation, papers spread out on the coffee table between them. I sat in my car for a moment, watching them through the window. The man looked familiar, but I couldn't place him. He was gesturing animatedly, pointing at the papers, while Jade nodded and took notes. My phone buzzed with a text from my daughter Emma. Dad, Grandma's driving us home now. Should be there in 20 minutes. I typed back, see you soon, sweetheart. Whatever was happening in my living room, it would have to wait. My daughters were coming home, and they deserved better than walking into the middle of whatever scheme Jade was cooking up with her mysterious visitor. I got out of the car and walked to the front door, my key ready. Time to see what new surprises my wife had in store for me. The man in the suit turned out to be Jade's father, Wilder Corren. I should have recognized him immediately, but he looked older than when I'd seen him last Christmas. Grayer, more frail, with the kind of pallor that suggested serious health problems. Cole, he said, standing as I entered the living room. Good to see you. Wilder. I shook his hand, noting how thin it had become. I didn't know you were coming to town. Last-minute trip. Jade called yesterday, said there were some family matters we needed to discuss. I looked at the papers scattered across our coffee table. Legal documents, from what I could see, with official letterheads and dense paragraphs of text. What kind of family matters? Jade and her father exchanged glances. Maybe we should wait until after the girls get home, Jade said. We can talk later. We can talk now. I sat down in my usual chair, making it clear I wasn't going anywhere. What's going on? Wilder cleared his throat. Cole, I want you to know this isn't personal. I've always liked you, always thought you were good for Jade, but sometimes circumstances require difficult decisions. What kind of decisions? I'm filing for emergency custody of Emma and Sophie. The words hit me like a physical blow. I stared at Wilder, then at Jade, trying to process what I'd just heard. Custody? Why would you? I stopped, understanding flooding through me. This is about the divorce. This is about what's best for the girls, Jade said, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. You think taking them away from their father is what's best for them? I think removing them from an unstable situation is what's best for them. Wilder's voice was gentle but firm. Cole, you work 18 hours a day. You're never home. You don't know their friends, their teachers, their interests. When's the last time you attended one of Emma's soccer games? The question stung because I couldn't answer it. Between the demands of the business and my own emotional withdrawal over the past few months, I'd been absent from too many important moments in my daughter's lives. That doesn't give you the right to take them away from me. It gives me the right to petition the court for what I believe is in their best interest. Wilder gathered the papers from the coffee table. I've spoken with an attorney. Given the circumstances of your marriage, the instability in the household, and your work schedule, there's a strong case for temporary custody while you and Jade sort things out. What circumstances of our marriage? Another glance between Jade and her father. This time, Jade answered. The fighting, Cole, the tension, the fact that you've been emotionally absent for months. The girls have noticed. Emma asked me last week if we were getting divorced. And what did you tell her? I told her we were working through some problems. While you were planning to leave me for another man. Wilder's eyebrows rose. Another man? Jade's face flushed red. That's not... It's complicated. It's not complicated at all. You've been having an affair with Trent Corren for months. You told me yourself that you love him. And now you want to take my daughters away so you can start a new life without any inconvenient reminders of your old one. That's not true. Isn't it? I stood up, anger finally breaking through the shock. You've been planning this, haven't you? The affair, the custody petition, maybe even the divorce itself. How long have you been working on this exit strategy, Jade? Cole, please. How long? She was quiet for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. 6 months. 6 months. I repeated the words, trying to absorb their full meaning. So, this whole thing, the marriage counseling, the postnuptial agreement, the promises to work things out, that was all just a setup. The counseling was real. I really wanted to save our marriage. But you were already seeing Trent. No, that came later. After it became clear that you weren't going to change. After it became clear that I wasn't going to change into someone who would hand over half his company without a fight, you mean? Wilder cleared his throat. Cole, I think you're misunderstanding the situation. Am I? Let me guess. Jade's told you that I'm some kind of workaholic monster who ignores his family and cares more about money than people. She's probably told you that she's been trying to save our marriage while I've been cold and distant and unreasonable. And now she's convinced you that the only way to protect Emma and Sophie is to take them away from their terrible father. Something like that, Wilder admitted. Did she also tell you that she's been systematically withdrawing cash from our joint accounts? Or that she's been using client information from my property management software to steer business to her boyfriend's inspection company? Or that she forged documents to make it look like my business was marital property when it's specifically protected under our postnuptial agreement? The silence that followed was deafening. Jade had gone pale, while Wilder looked confused. "What are you talking about?" he asked. I pulled out my phone and opened the file Rick had sent me that afternoon. "I'm talking about the fact that your daughter has been planning to defraud me out of millions of dollars while destroying my relationship with my children, and she's been using you to do it." I handed Wilder the phone, showing him the financial analysis Rick had compiled. "Those are cash withdrawals from our joint account over the past 8 months, always just under the reporting threshold, always on days when Jade claimed to be showing properties, except there's no record of property showings on most of those days." Wilder studied the screen, his expression growing more troubled with each line item. "And this," I continued, pulling up another file, "is a list of properties where Jade worked with Trent Corren on building inspections. Notice anything interesting about the pattern?" "They're all properties where the inspection found major issues," Wilder said slowly. "Issues that required expensive repairs, performed by contractors that Trent recommended. Contractors who paid kickbacks for the referrals." "That's not true," Jade said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Isn't it? Because I've got documentation of the whole scheme, Jade. Bank records, email communications, even recordings of phone calls where you and Trent discussed how to maximize the profit from each deal." I was bluffing about the recordings, but the look on Jade's face told me I'd hit close to the mark. "Cole, I can explain." "I'm sure you can. Just like you can explain why you forged your father's signature on the custody petition." Wilder's head snapped up. "What?" "You didn't actually file that petition, did you, Wilder? Your daughter did, using your name and forging your signature, just like she's been forging documents to support her claim that my company is marital property." I could see the moment when Wilder realized he'd been manipulated. His face went through a series of expressions: confusion, understanding, then anger. "Jade, is this true?" "Dad, I can explain. Did you forge my signature?" She was quiet for a long moment. Then, so softly, I almost couldn't hear her. "Yes." The front door opened, and I heard Emma's voice calling out, "We're home!" The three of us froze, staring at each other across the wreckage of our family drama. In a few seconds, my daughters would walk into the living room and find their mother, grandfather, and father in the middle of what was clearly a serious confrontation. "We'll finish this later," I said quietly. "All of it." Wilder nodded, gathering his papers with shaking hands. Jade sat back down on the couch, trying to compose herself. Emma and Sophie burst through the living room doorway, full of energy and stories from their weekend at their grandparents' house. They were 16 now, old enough to sense tension, but young enough to be distracted by their own concerns. "Grandpa," Sophie hugged Wilder enthusiastically, "I didn't know you were coming to visit. Last-minute trip, sweetheart. I wanted to see how you girls were doing." As my daughters chattered about their weekend, I watched Jade's face. She was smiling and responding to their stories, but I could see the strain around her eyes, the tension in her shoulders. She'd gambled everything on a scheme that was now falling apart. The affair, the financial fraud, the custody manipulation, all of it was unraveling, and we were just getting started. Monday morning arrived with the kind of clarity that comes after a sleepless night, the sort of sharp, unforgiving clarity that strips away excuses and leaves only decisions. I'd spent hours staring at the ceiling, replaying conversations, re-examining expressions, connecting dots I'd been too trusting or too tired to see before. Every lie, every omission, every half-truth from the day before rearranged itself into something unmistakable. By the time my alarm went off at 6, I'd made several important decisions, each one settling into place with a calm certainty that surprised me. The first was that I was done being reactive. For months, I'd been responding to Jade's moves instead of making my own, waiting for explanations, adjusting to crises she manufactured, cleaning up messes I hadn't made. I'd let myself believe that patience was strength, that restraint was maturity. In reality, It had just made me predictable. That was about to change. The second was that I needed to protect my daughters from the worst of what was coming. Emma and Sophie deserved better than being caught in the middle of their parents' war, better than whispered arguments and legal maneuvers disguised as concern. Whatever Jade and I were about to become to each other, I refused to let it poison the one thing that still mattered more than my pride. The third was that Jade had underestimated me for the last time. I got up quietly, moving through the house on instinct alone, showered and dressed for work. Jade was still asleep in the guest room, her door closed, a physical reminder of how far apart we already were. The girls wouldn't be up for another hour. Perfect. No witnesses, no emotional landmines before coffee. I made coffee and settled at the kitchen table with my laptop. The house felt different in the early morning light, less like a battlefield, more like a neutral zone. Rick's public statement was ready to go, scheduled to post to my LinkedIn at 7 a.m. I read it carefully, line by line, weighing every word the way lawyers weigh contracts. I reviewed it one more time. After much consideration, my wife Jade and I have decided to divorce due to irreconcilable differences. While this is a difficult time for our family, we are committed to handling this transition with dignity and respect. This personal matter will not affect my professional commitments or the operations of our company. I appreciate your understanding and continued support. Professional, controlled, dignified, and most importantly, it would be public before Jade had a chance to create her own narrative, before her father could start making calls, before rumors could metastasize into reputations. I approved the post and closed my laptop, feeling the smallest sense of momentum for the first time in weeks. My phone buzzed with a text from Rick. "Financial analysis complete. You need to see this ASAP." I was about to respond when I heard footsteps on the stairs. Jade appeared in the kitchen doorway, already dressed for work, despite the early hour. Her hair was pulled back, her expression carefully neutral, like she'd spent her own sleepless night preparing for this conversation. "You're up early," she said, pouring herself coffee as if nothing fundamental had shifted. "Couldn't sleep. Too much to think about." She sat across from me at the table, and for a moment, we were just two people sharing morning coffee like we had thousands of times before. No lawyers, no accusations, just muscle memory. Then reality reasserted itself, heavy and unavoidable. "About yesterday," she began. "What about it?" "My father was out of line. I never asked him to file for custody." "But you did forge his signature on the petition." She was quiet for a moment, staring into her coffee like the answer might be hiding there. "Yes." "Why?" "Because I was scared," she said finally. "Because I thought you'd try to take the girls away from me when you found out about Trent." "So you decided to take them away from me first?" "I was trying to protect them." "From what? From their father who loves them?" "From a father who's never around," she shot back, the restraint cracking. "Who doesn't know anything about their lives, who's been emotionally absent for months." Her words hung in the air between us, sharp and deliberate, and I realized she truly believed them. The words stung because there was truth in them. I had been absent, distracted, focused on the business at the expense of everything else. But that didn't justify what she'd done. "You're right," I said. "I haven't been the father I should have been. But that doesn't give you the right to manipulate the situation." "I know." Her voice was small. "I know it doesn't." "What else, Jade?" "What do you mean?" "What else haven't you told me? Because I'm finding out that everything I thought I knew about our marriage, about you, about our finances, has been a lie. So what else is there?" She stared into her coffee cup for a long time. When she finally looked up, I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before. Fear. "There's something else," she said quietly. "What?" "The marriage counseling sessions with Dr. Valden. He contacted me last week." "About what?" "He said someone had offered him money to diagnose you with narcissistic personality disorder. In writing. for use in divorce proceedings. The kitchen seemed to tilt around me. Someone offered him money to lie about me? Yes. Who? She was quiet for so long I thought she wasn't going to answer. Me, she whispered. The admission hit me like a physical blow. I stared at my wife, the woman I'd shared my life with for 22 years, the mother of my children, the person I'd trusted more than anyone else in the world, and realized I didn't know her at all. You tried to bribe our marriage counselor to lie about me. I was desperate. Trent said I needed leverage for the divorce, something that would ensure I got primary custody and a fair settlement. A fair settlement? You mean half of my company? It's marital property, Cole. I helped build that business. No, it's not. We signed a postnuptial agreement specifically excluding business assets in cases of infidelity. That agreement isn't valid. Why not? Because I was coerced into signing it. Dr. Valden pressured me, said it was necessary for rebuilding trust. I can challenge it in court. I leaned back in my chair, finally seeing the full scope of what Jade had been planning. The affair with Trent wasn't just about romance. It was about money. My money. The custody petition, the forged documents, the attempted bribery of our therapist. It was all part of an elaborate scheme to defraud me of everything I'd worked to build. How much? I asked. What? How much did you offer Dr. Valden? 15,000. And what did he say? He said he'd think about it. I pulled out my phone and opened my email. There, sent at 6:47 a.m., was a message from Dr. Soren Valden with the subject line, "Urgent matter regarding Jade Vance." I opened it and read, "Mr. Vance, I need to inform you that your wife approached me last week with an inappropriate request. She offered me $15,000 to provide a written diagnosis stating that you suffer from narcissistic personality disorder for use in divorce proceedings. I declined and have reported this incident to the state licensing board. I have also made a recording of our conversation available to your attorney. Please contact me at your earliest convenience." I turned my phone around and showed Jade the email. Her face went white. "He recorded our conversation," I said, "and he reported you to the licensing board." "Cole, I can explain—" "No." I stood up, suddenly calm. "You can't explain this. You can't explain away fraud, attempted bribery, forgery, or any of the other things you've done. You made your choices, Jade. Now you get to live with the consequences." I heard footsteps on the stairs. The girls were getting up. "We're going to have breakfast with our daughters like a normal family," I said quietly. "We're going to smile and make small talk and pretend everything is fine, and then you're going to pack a bag and leave." "Cole, you're going to pack a bag and leave, and you're going to stay away until we can figure out how to handle this without destroying Emma and Sophie in the process. You can't kick me out of my own house. Actually, I can. The house is in my name, purchased before our marriage, just like the business you've been trying to steal." Emma appeared in the kitchen doorway, already dressed for school. "Morning, Mom. Morning, Dad." "Morning, sweetheart," I said, forcing a smile. "Want some pancakes?" As I stood at the stove, flipping pancakes and making small talk with my daughter, I could feel Jade watching me. When I glanced over, she was staring at her phone with an expression of growing panic. My LinkedIn post had gone live. By now, 300 of my professional contacts knew that Jade and I were getting divorced. Her carefully planned narrative was already crumbling, and we were just getting started. By Wednesday, Jade's world had begun to collapse in ways I don't think either of us had anticipated. The LinkedIn post had done exactly what Rick intended. It controlled the narrative and positioned me as the reasonable party in an unfortunate situation. But the real damage came from what happened next. Dr. Valden's report to the state licensing board had triggered an investigation into Jade's real estate activities. When investigators started looking into her recent transactions, they discovered the pattern of suspicious building inspections and contractor referrals that I'd identified. By Tuesday afternoon, Her real estate license was suspended pending a full review. I learned about it from Emma, who'd heard it from a classmate whose mother worked at the same agency. "Dad, is it true that Mom's in trouble at work?" she asked as I drove her home from soccer practice. "What did you hear?" "Jessica's mom said there's some kind of investigation, that Mom might lose her license." I glanced at Emma in the rearview mirror. At 16, she was old enough to understand that something serious was happening, but young enough to be scared by it. "Your mom is dealing with some work-related issues," I said carefully. "It's complicated, but it doesn't have anything to do with you and Sophie." "Is that why she's staying at Grandma's house?" "Partly." Emma was quiet for a moment. "Are you and Mom getting divorced?" The question I'd been dreading. I pulled into our driveway and turned off the engine before answering. "Yes, sweetheart, we are." "Because of the other man?" I turned around to face her. "What do you know about that?" "Sophie and I aren't stupid, Dad. We've seen the texts, heard the phone calls. We know Mom's been seeing someone. The fact that my daughters had been aware of Jade's affair while I was still in denial was both heartbreaking and infuriating. How long had they been carrying that knowledge? How long had they been waiting for one of us to be honest with them? "I'm sorry you had to find out that way," I said. "Your mother and I should have handled this better." "Is she going to jail?" "No, honey, she's not going to jail. She might lose her job, but that's different from going to jail." Emma nodded, processing this information. "Dad, are you okay?" The question caught me off guard. In all of this, the betrayal, the financial schemes, the custody manipulation, I'd been so focused on protecting my daughters and my business that I hadn't really considered how I was doing emotionally. "I'm managing," I said. "It's been a difficult time, but I'm managing." "Good, because Sophie and I need you to be okay." That evening, after the girls had gone to bed, I sat in my home office reviewing the latest reports from Rick. The financial analysis had revealed even more concerning patterns than we'd initially discovered. Over the past 8 months, Jade had withdrawn nearly $47,000 in cash from our joint accounts. She'd also opened 3 credit cards in her name only, maxing them out on purchases I couldn't identify. More troubling was what Rick had found in the mirrored data from her phone. 14,000 messages between Jade and Trent, dating back 7 months. The early messages were flirtatious, but relatively innocent. The later ones revealed the full scope of their scheme. Trent hadn't just been Jade's lover, he'd been her partner in a systematic fraud operation targeting her real estate clients. They'd been splitting the kickbacks from contractors, manipulating inspection reports to create unnecessary repair work, and even steering clients toward overpriced properties where they could maximize their commissions. But the most damaging messages were the ones where they discussed their plans for after the divorce. Jade had promised Trent half of my company's value, claiming it was marital property that she could claim in the settlement. She'd shown him forged financial documents that inflated the business's worth while understating my personal investment in it. Trent, it turned out, wasn't just a building inspector with a side hustle. He was a convicted fraudster who'd served 18 months in federal prison for a mortgage scam in Arizona. He'd moved to our state after his release and had been working under a slightly altered version of his real name. I was reading through the background check Rick had commissioned when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Jade's number. "Hello, Jade." "Cole, we need to talk." "About what?" "About everything. About the investigation, about the girls, about how we're going to handle this." "There's nothing to handle. You committed fraud, you got caught, and now you're facing the consequences. It's not that simple." "It's exactly that simple." There was a long pause. "Cole, I'm scared." The admission surprised me. Throughout this entire ordeal, Jade had been defiant, manipulative, or angry. I'd never heard her sound genuinely frightened. "What are you scared of?" "The investigation, losing my license, what this means for the girls." "You should have thought about that before you started stealing from your clients. I never meant for it to go this far." "How far did you mean for it to go?" Another pause. I don't know. I felt so trapped, Cole. In our marriage, in my life, in everything. When I met Trent, he made me feel like I could have something different, something better. So you decided to steal your way to a better life. It wasn't supposed to be stealing. The contractor referrals, the inspection fees, that's just how business works in real estate. Everyone does it. Everyone doesn't forge documents and bribe therapists and file false custody petitions. I know I went too far. You went too far the moment you decided to have an affair. Everything else was just you doubling down on a bad decision. I heard her crying softly on the other end of the line. A month ago, the sound would have broken my heart. Now, it just made me tired. What do you want, Jade? I want to come home. I want to try to fix this. There's nothing to fix. Our marriage is over. The only question now is how much damage you're going to do to our daughters in the process. Cole, please. The girls know, Jade. They've known about the affair for months. They know about the investigation. They know we're getting divorced. The only thing they don't know is the full extent of what you've done, and I'm trying to keep it that way for their sake. Thank you. Don't thank me. I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for Emma and Sophie. What happens now? Now you face the consequences of your choices. The state investigation, the divorce proceedings, the custody arrangements, all of it. And Trent? What about him? He's been arrested. I sat up straighter. When? This afternoon, federal charges. Something about his background check revealing violations of his parole terms. So Trent's criminal history had finally caught up with him. I felt a grim satisfaction at the news. I'm sorry to hear that, I lied. Cole, I need you to know, I never meant to hurt you, or the girls. I just wanted something more. You had something more, Jade. You had a family, a home, a husband who loved you despite his flaws. You threw it all away for a convicted criminal and a get-rich-quick scheme. I know. Do you? Do you really understand what you've lost? She was quiet for a long time. Yes, she finally whispered. I think I'm starting to. After I hung up, I sat in my office for a long time, thinking about the conversation. There had been genuine remorse in Jade's voice, real regret for what she'd done. But it was too little, too late. The damage was done. Our marriage was over. Her career was likely finished, and our daughters were going to have to live with the consequences of their mother's choices for years to come. I looked at the framed photo on my desk, Jade, Emma, Sophie, and me at the beach last summer, all of us laughing at something Sophie had said. It felt like a lifetime ago. Tomorrow, I would have to tell my daughters that their mother's boyfriend had been arrested. Tomorrow, I would have to explain why their mother might not be coming home anytime soon. Tomorrow, I would have to help them navigate the wreckage of their family. But tonight, I just sat in the quiet of my office and mourned for everything we'd lost. 3 weeks later, I was sitting in my attorney's office, reviewing the final divorce settlement. The postnuptial agreement had held up exactly as Rick had predicted. Jade's infidelity voided any claim she might have had to my business assets. The financial fraud investigation had been concluded, resulting in the permanent revocation of her real estate license and a requirement to pay restitution to the clients she'd defrauded. Trent Corren had been sentenced to 3 years in federal prison for violating his parole terms. The additional charges related to the real estate fraud were still pending, but his attorney was negotiating a plea deal that would likely add another 18 months to his sentence. The custody arrangement is straightforward, my attorney, Patricia Hendricks, explained as she walked me through the final documents. You retain primary custody of Emma and Sophie. Jade gets supervised visitation every other weekend, pending the completion of her court-mandated counseling program. Supervised by whom? A court-appointed social worker, at least initially. After 6 months, if she's compliant with all the terms of the agreement, we can revisit the arrangement. I nodded, signing the documents. It felt surreal to be dissolving 22 years of marriage with a series of signatures on legal papers. What about the house? Remains yours, as it was purchased prior to the marriage and never transferred to joint ownership. Jade has 30 days to remove her personal belongings. And the financial obligations? She's responsible for the restitution payments to her former clients, plus the legal fees associated with the fraud investigation. You're not liable for any of her debts incurred during the marriage, given the circumstances. Patricia closed the file and looked at me across her desk. Cole, I have to say, I've handled a lot of divorce cases, but I've rarely seen one where the documentation was as thorough as what you and Rick provided. It made all the difference. Rick deserves the credit for that. Perhaps, but you made the decision to protect yourself and your daughters instead of just reacting emotionally. That took considerable restraint. As I drove home from the attorney's office, I thought about Patricia's comment. Had I shown restraint, or had I simply been too shocked by the scope of Jade's betrayal to react with pure emotion? Either way, it was over now. The marriage, the legal proceedings, the investigations, all of it was finally behind us. Emma and Sophie were waiting for me when I got home, both of them sitting at the kitchen table with homework spread out in front of them. Pencils, notebooks, and half-empty mugs were scattered across the surface, evidence that they'd been pretending to study while really waiting for me to walk through the door. They looked up expectantly as I walked in, searching my face for answers before I even said a word. "How did it go?" Emma asked, her voice steady but her shoulders tense. "It's finished," I said, setting my keys down and taking a seat across from them. "The divorce is final." The words landed softly, but they carried weight. Sophie, who had been quieter than usual over the past few weeks, looked up from her math homework, her pencil hovering above the page. "Does this mean Mom's not coming back?" she asked, carefully, like she was afraid of breaking something fragile. "Not to live here, no," I said gently. "But you'll still see her regularly, every other weekend, and probably more often once she gets settled." Sophie nodded slowly, absorbing it. Emma stayed still, watching her sister instead of me. "Where is she going to live?" Sophie asked. "With Grandma and Grandpa for now. Eventually she'll find her own place." I kept my tone neutral, factual, the way you explain weather or schedules. Emma closed her textbook, folding her hands on top of it. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Are you happy?" The question caught me off guard, not because it was inappropriate, but because it was precise, too precise. Was I happy? I was relieved, certainly. I was grateful that the legal complications were resolved. I was proud of how Emma and Sophie had handled an impossible situation with maturity beyond their years. I felt calmer than I had in months, like a constant pressure had finally eased. But happy? I wasn't sure I remembered what that felt like anymore, or whether it was something you noticed while it was happening. "I'm content," I said finally. "I'm glad that we can move forward now, that we don't have to keep dealing with lawyers and investigations and uncertainty." Emma tilted her head slightly, unconvinced. "But are you happy?" she pressed, not challenging me, just wanting the truth. I looked at my daughters, really looked at them. Emma, 16 and wise beyond her years, already showing signs of the strong woman she was becoming. Sophie, also 16 but younger in temperament, still hopeful despite everything she'd witnessed over the past few months. They'd lost something too, even if they didn't fully have the words for it yet. "I'm happy that I have you two," I said. "I'm happy that we're together, that we survived this, that we can start building something better." Emma smiled, relief softening her expression. "Good. Because Sophie and I have been worried about you." "You don't need to worry about me," I said. "That's not your job." "It kind of is, though," Sophie said quietly, looking down at her hands. "We're a family. We take care of each other." That evening, after the girls had gone to bed, I found myself in my office again, but this time I wasn't reviewing legal documents or financial reports. Instead, I was looking at college brochures that Emma had left on my desk. She was a senior now, would be graduating in 6 months. Sophie was talking about studying abroad her junior year of college. My daughters were growing up, becoming independent, preparing to build their own lives. For the first time in months, I allowed myself to think about what I wanted my life to look like going forward. The business was thriving. We'd signed 3 major contracts while I was dealing with the divorce, and Rick had proven himself more than capable of handling day-to-day operations. I had financial security, a beautiful home, and 2 incredible daughters who loved me despite my flaws. What I didn't have was a partner. After 22 years of marriage, I was single again at 44. The thought was both terrifying and oddly liberating. My phone buzzed with a text message. I expected it to be from Rick or one of the girls, but the number was unfamiliar. "Mr. Vance, this is Dr. Valden. I wanted to check in and see how you're doing. If you'd like to continue with individual counseling sessions, I have some openings next week." I stared at the message for a long time before responding. "Thank you for reaching out. I think I'd like that." As I sent the reply, I realized that Emma had been right to ask if I was happy. I wasn't. Not yet. But for the first time in months, I thought I might be able to get there. The next morning, I woke up early and made coffee, just like I had every day for the past month. But instead of immediately diving into work emails or legal documents, I sat at the kitchen table and watched the sunrise through the window. Emma appeared in the doorway, already dressed for school. "You're up early," she said, pouring herself orange juice. "Couldn't sleep. Too much to think about." "Good thoughts or bad thoughts?" "Both," I admitted. "Mostly good, though." She sat down across from me, studying my face. "You look different." "Different how?" "Lighter, I guess. Like you're not carrying something heavy anymore." She was right. The weight I'd been carrying for months, the uncertainty, the anger, the constant vigilance, was finally gone. What remained was grief for what we'd lost, but also hope for what we might build. "Emma, I want you to know something," I said. "These past few months have been difficult for all of us, but especially for you and Sophie. You've both handled this situation with more grace and maturity than I had any right to expect. I'm proud of you." "Thanks, Dad. And I want you to know that I'm going to do better. As a father, as a person, I'm going to be more present, more involved in your lives. I know I wasn't always there when you needed me, but that's going to change." Emma smiled. "I'd like that." "Good. Because you and Sophie are the most important things in my life, and I want to make sure you know that." Sophie appeared in the kitchen, her hair still messy from sleep. "Are we having a family meeting?" "Just talking," I said. "Come sit with us." As my daughters settled at the table, chattering about their plans for the day, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Peace. Not happiness, not yet, but peace. The divorce was final. The investigations were closed. The legal battles were over. Now we could begin the work of healing, of rebuilding, of becoming the family we were meant to be. It wouldn't be easy, and it wouldn't be quick. But for the first time in a very long time, I believed it was possible. And that was enough to start with. 6 months later, I sold the software company to a larger firm for $6.8 million. Emma was accepted to her first-choice college with a partial scholarship. Sophie started dating a boy from her debate team who actually seemed worthy of her. I began seeing Dr. Valden regularly and started dating a woman I met at one of Emma's soccer games. Jade completed her counseling program and found work as an administrative assistant. Our interactions remained cordial but distant, focused entirely on the girl's needs. She never remarried. Sometimes, late at night, I still thought about what might have been if we'd handled our problems differently, if we'd been more honest with each other, if we'd fought harder to save what we'd built together. But mostly, I looked forward. because that's what you do when you survive something that could have destroyed you. You look forward, you build something better, and you never, ever take for granted the people who choose to stay.